Hello, everybody. We're here for our webinar. If you don't see RFEs, you're not doing EB2 NIWs. Prepare for 2024 with RFE Masterclass. Brought to you by Joorney Business Plans. We already have 122 people here waiting for what our wonderful guests have to say. So I'm really excited about today. We have 300 people registered. So we're expecting about half of that for attendees. But we have a lot to cover, so I'm probably going to start very early and not maybe wait for people to connect. They can see also the recording. Everybody's going to receive the recording at the end once we finalize, so you can go back to any of the information that we're going to be providing here today. Where are people joining us from? If you can share on the chat, that would be amazing. Spain, Houston, San Antonio, Miami, Ecuador, Los Angeles. Great. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Okay, so let's get started. So hello, everyone, again, and welcome to today's webinar. If you don't see RFEs, then you're not doing EB2 NIWs. A nice reminder that today you will receive 1.5 CLE credits for attending the webinar, which is a great little extra for showing up. I will be announcing the code at the end of the session and right before the Q&A. My name is Marianela Mansour. I'm Director of Sales and Marketing here at Joorney Business Plans, and I'll be today's host. Navigating the EB2 NIW application isn't a walk in the park. We're here because we recognize the hurdles, the blunt realities, and the frustrations when facing RFEs. What's our game plan today? We're dissecting case studies for each of the three prongs of the NIW, aiming to discover the complexities and to help you prepare with strategies to address them effectively, with the help of three wonderful guest speakers. We're not just talking theory here. We're going into real world scenarios, real RFEs, real situations, real cases, demonstrating exceptional ability, showcasing national importance, proving the ability to advance, and more. These are the challenges that we face together. And today, we're not just acknowledging these challenges, we're confronting them head first. As many of you know, at Joorney, we learn from developing multiple business plans for EB2 NIW. So we are very familiar with this visa category and very aware that getting RFEs is expected and almost a standard part of the process. We're also very fortunate to get to see many of these RFEs due to the volume of projects we handle. And we are here today to share that expertise with you. So let's try to cut through the red tape, uncover what makes USCIS officers tick, and prepare for RFE responses that stand strong. So to help us explore this topic, I'm happy to say that we are joined by three wonderful experts on the topic. I'm happy to welcome Anthony DeLucia, who practices business immigration law as an attorney with Colombo Hurd. Anthony specializes responding to RFE requests and appealing decisions from USCIS in many different case types, where he assists clients in navigating RFEs and appeal processes. As an RFE and appeal specialist, Anthony works to ensure all facets of the client's petition are appropriately considered by USCIS post-filing. Thank you, Anthony, for being here.
Absolutely. Happy to be here. Happy to help out and, hopefully you get some good information out of this.
Indeed. Thank you. And now let's introduce our second guest, Flavia Santos Lloyd. She has been in the immigration field for over 20 years now, first as a paralegal, then as an attorney. She's the founder and managing attorney at Santos Lloyd Law Firm, and a firm she started in 2016. Her practice focuses on a broad spectrum of immigration matters, but her primary focus, and the reason why she's here, is that her expertise is extraordinary ability cases and EB2 NIW. As she also passionate about teaching, she teaches subjects tested in the California bar exam and immigration law at different law schools. She also devotes her time to scholarly work by writing research papers and presenting them at national and international conferences. Thank you, Flavia, for being here.
Thank you for the invite. I'm really excited. So thank you.
Wonderful. Last but not least, I also want to introduce you all to one of our senior project managers at Joorney, who has been working with business plans for immigration for more than 7 years. And she also knows a thing or two about EB2 NIW RFEs from Joorney's experience and perspective. Ana Ortiz, thanks to her hands-on involvement with EB2 NIW cases, Ana has been instrumental in assisting a diverse range of entrepreneurs in realizing their business visions in the U.S. We can say that she has a front row seat to many instances of RFEs in EB2 NIW cases, and she has seen what they typically ask for and the best way to answer. Ana is an amazing asset to our team and is here to help us dive into these complex topics. So thank you, Ana, for being here.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much. Really happy to be here with you today.
Wonderful. So thank you all for being here. We have a lot to touch on. I just wanted to say before we got started that this is a webinar that is intended for attorneys. So if you are an applicant and you're here, it's okay if you're going to be confused. Probably a lot of the things that are here you're not going to understand, but I think it's more of a reason to understand that you do need an attorney to help you navigate this process for sure. Am I right, Anthony and Flavia?
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Great. So everybody who's here, we're going to have the full session. At the end, we're going to have Q&A. There is a questions tab on the right-hand side. So if you have any questions, please add them there, and we'll get to them either prong by prong, or we'll get to them at the end, okay? So we have a lot to talk about, so let's get started. Let me pull up the presentation here. And I wanted to start with a question where we can warm up, right? So we're going to talk eligibility. If you want, Anthony, you can talk about one of the subcategories, advanced degree, and then Flavia can take exceptional ability. So we're all ears.
Awesome. So obviously one of the ways that you can, establish eligibility for the EB2 visa category before you get into the NIW even is whether or not the individual is a member of the professions holding an advanced degree. Now, generally speaking, the baseline for this is establishing that the petitioner in the case has an advanced degree, meaning something above a bachelor's degree. If they obtained an advanced degree from a U.S. institution, great, we just have to submit that. But if they obtained an advanced degree from outside of the United States, you need to provide evidence that the degree is the equivalent to the U.S. analog. So you need to make sure that you provide that. As a caveat in the statute, you can also demonstrate that an individual has an advanced degree if they have a bachelor's degree or the foreign equivalent, plus at least 5 years of post-baccalaureate progressive experience in the field. Now, that second portion obviously is a little bit more nuanced, which we'll, I'm sure, touch on later. But as a baseline standpoint, you should always provide evidence that they have the degree. Providing evidence of the transcripts are certainly beneficial in order to demonstrate that it is, in fact, a full baccalaureate, master's, whatever it may be. If it is an advanced degree, providing the actual degree itself and transcripts. And then if the petitioner, your client, has a degree from outside of the United States, obtaining that qualification, that certification that they are equivalent from some form of equivalency outfit. So there are several, obviously, professional entities and organizations that provide educational equivalency, information. They certify that this is the equivalent of a U.S. baccalaureate, master's, PhD, JD, whatever it may be. But it is imperative, if you go the bachelor route, to focus on that, the 5 years post-baccalaureate experience.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. And now let's go with Flavia to warm up on the exceptional ability subcategory.
All right, on the exceptional ability, we have 6 bullet points, and they're pretty self-explanatory. But what I want to do is really briefly give you some hints when you're working on these cases to what you look for. Because, for example, when you start with an official academic record showing that you have a degree, diploma, etc., it's to compare with advanced degree, it's much less specific. So as long as you have something post-secondary, after high school, and it relates to the area of exceptional ability, and of course the proposed endeavor, this should satisfy the criteria. So don't compare one with the other, because they are not comparable. So this is important. So point B here, let's see, our next one here. Experience. Now, we have here from current or former employers showing that the alien has at least 10 years of full-time experience. Now, little nuggets that we are seeing on the RFEs, they're very specific, okay? So here we're looking for 10 years versus 5 years. There's no experience, there's no requirement that this experience comes after the education. Something that is very important to highlight, that there's no requirement that this experience has to be progressive, unlike you have on the advanced degree criteria. And if you're going to be using letters, keep in mind that letters from HR department, letterhead, signature, very specific dates. If you say approximately, that's not going to be good enough. So you have to show date, month, year, and state that it's full-time. So just something to, a little nugget there. Third criteria here, you have a license to practice and the professional certification. Now, this used to be, I don't know, Anthony, feel free to jump in. This used to be very easy to prove. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Easy.
But lately, USCIS has emphasized the importance of the license being required in order to practice the profession. You will see I have a site here. Common citations in the RFEs are INA section 102A32, where they actually go into the profession and explaining architects, engineers, lawyers, everything, that they're looking for licenses for the individual to act, and work on their profession. So here's the thing, we push back on this. And again, this is a conversation, so Anthony, feel free to jump in. What we do here, it's worthwhile making arguments that if you have an entrepreneur license, a real estate license, or food license, you should make the argument. And sometimes they are accepted by USCIS. But this is recent that we are seeing, since we're talking about the trends in the eligibility. Then we move on here. Again, I'm trying to be fast here. Evidence that the alien has commanded high salary or other remuneration for their services that demonstrates exceptional ability. It used to be easy. Another one that used to be very, very easy to meet, not nowadays. What we do nowadays, we do at least ask two pieces of evidence. We have reliable evidence of their income with their tax returns, letter from HR. We also compare with the industry standards, but it used to be very easy, but now it's becoming more subjective and more difficult to meet. And we'll do a deep dive throughout the presentation.
Right. I mean, sorry, not to interrupt. I mean, generally speaking, like a safe bar that I found is just top 10%. If you can demonstrate that they are within the top 10% of earners in that particular field, occupational classification, whatever it may be, whether that's in the U.S. or in their home nation, that's usually something that to USCIS demonstrates exceptional ability. But I have seen, in again, talking about trends, I have seen officers really push back on that. They want to know how this high salary is representative of them having exceptional ability. Just because they make a lot of money doesn't necessarily mean that they have exceptional ability. So it's important to make sure to carry over why this matters.
And another thing that we used to do that used to be very, it would pass again, we would stretch because you have the other remuneration, right? So we used to, let's say your salary was low, we would show that if you're the owner of the LLC, the income from the LLC is actually yours, and your sales and your business profits and high profit margin over the industry. Those were the days. That does not usually fly anymore. But again, hey, make the argument. You know what I mean? Make the argument. If you have good evidence, you have a salary that is low, but you have other data that you can back up, why not? And finally here, evidence of membership in professional associations. Finally, no, because I have one more, sorry. The membership. Now, it's one of the easier criteria to meet. Sometimes you have USCIS site INA 101A32 saying that the association is not a professional association and it does not advance the specific profession listed in the code section, but we push back. I think this is something that is worth including the printout about the about us from the website. Really do a deep dive on why that organization and the membership is important for that person. But recently, we've seen an uptick of INA 102, A32 pushing back on that. And finally, the last criteria here is evidence of recognition for achievement. Now, here what we do, we have an objective and subjective perspective, right? So objective, what do you use? You use awards, prizes, press, articles, and anything that you can show that this person has received achievements. Now, the subjective part, we normally use the recommendation letters. Our policy is we send a matrix to a client, and they fill out the matrix, and we draft the recommendation letters. It's more work for us, but at the same time, we hit what we need to hit, and it doesn't become a back and forth of editing. So a long time ago, I decided this makes more sense for us. But, what we do is the last thing strategically for you guys, I think that you should be drafting the letter at the end. Why? Because you need to look at what holes you have, what you need to plug in. And that's the last thing we do, because we want to make sure that if there's something weak, we probably can try to back it up with evidence, with testimonials. So, that way we can show the achievements that this person had in their career and so on and so forth. Now,
real quick. Oh, sorry. Do you mind if I just opine on that a little?
Please do.
Absolutely. So in my experience, in my opinion, that is the biggest, really the biggest criteria that you want to try to hit with exceptional ability cases. It has parallels to obviously, original contributions of major significance in EB1A, but for the EB2 standpoint, hitting the recognition of the achievements and significant contributions really helps you overcome that final merits determination, at the end, because you've already established that this person has made significant contributions to the field. So you're, I guess, reducing your risk of an RFE if you can try to really harp on that last criteria. And if you get that, then your chances of either hitting a final merits determination challenge or even, obviously nobody gets denied, but in the event of a denial, you try to avoid that to the best of your ability, because at least you've demonstrated that what your client has done matters. It's significant. It is exceptional. So that's my 2 cents.
Which is a great segue to our lovely Kazarian two-step analysis, which it's becoming more and more common in the EB2 NIW context. If you want to go on a deep dive about this, go to the policy memorandum. USCIS policy memorandum is from December 22nd, 2010, and it's PM 602-0005.1. This goes into the final merits determination, which, by the way, I always rant about this when I talk about Kazarian because it's dicta, okay? Let's just step back and think about how our lives are miserable, both in the EB1A context. I know this is not an EB1A webinar, but it makes our life miserable, and now it's creeping up in the NIWs. For context here, and before I pass to Marianella and to Anna, the EB2 NIWs that I did in 2017 are not the NIWs that we do in 2023, okay? What we could get away with completely has changed. And part of it is really the Kazarian two-step analysis. So if you go into the policy menu, you need to be familiar, besides reading the case, you need to read the policy memo. You need to see how it applies. The policy menu is volume 6, chapter 5. So, and that's the final merits determination. So you have to be arguing exceptional ability, thinking of Kazarian. And thinking that can, so that tags as a great segue to what Anthony was saying, that you need to plug those holes with the letters and really hammer that contribution. So we don't have, you have 5 criteria, but we don't believe that you're good enough. Let me pass back to Marianella and to Anna.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Flavia. It was funny because when we started practicing and talking about the webinar that we were going to do, I asked you a question, and I said, there's somebody who asked, how do you avoid RFEs, right? And I loved it that you both laughed. And I said, okay, so that means we got a good title in for our webinar, right? So, I mean, it's happening everywhere. I mean, and going back to the title, if you're not seeing RFEs, then you're not doing EB2 NIWs, right? So talking about eligibility specifically, I wanted to ask, and I mean, you both can answer, or Anthony, Flavia, whoever wants to take it. How does the applicant's eligibility, whether if it's advanced degree or exceptional ability, impact on the overall EB2 NIW strategy and the RFEs?
I mean, just from my perspective, it's a two-step process, right? If you can't demonstrate that you are eligible for the baseline EB2, then the officer probably isn't going to give you as much leeway on the NIW process. So from the RFEs that I've seen, at least over the last year, because I do try to go like based on trends, obviously, over the last year, if you aren't providing enough evidence to prove that you at least meet the eligibility, then the NIW analysis, to be blunt, I guess, is going to be a little more nasty, a little more nitpicky, because you've already established to this officer that there's a question as to whether or not you even should get this visa at all, let alone the additional benefit of a waiver. So I do think it is critical to make sure that you at least set up at an initial phase that this person is eligible for this visa. And then we can get into whether or not they're even more eligible for this additional benefit on top of it. So I do think that the eligibility impacts the way that the NIW assessment subsequently happens.
And as far as requests for evidence goes, I see more requests for evidence on exceptional ability. You know, advanced degree is more linear, it's cleaner. I just don't see a pattern, but exceptional ability, besides the Kazarian, two-step approach, where we have to remember preponderance of evidence, people. We have to push back on that, but that's really a trend that we've seen. Also, we really have to screen our clients, right? Because you may have someone with an art history degree and it's an entrepreneur. Unfortunately, you have to go to exceptional ability. Or sometimes when you have that degree that is like, sometimes I will argue alternatively. That's something that I rarely do. It's very rare, but I'll give a quick example. Someone who has a law degree, but is a very successful entrepreneur. And we got her transcript showing her contracts class and her business law class, but I felt like I wasn't super comfortable. So alternatively, if you don't buy into my advanced degree idea, here, by the way, she has exceptional ability, but it was, you have to really hammer, because you cannot argue your other three prongs if you don't have a good foundation with eligibility.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And with respect to advanced degree, I there is one element that I have seen. It's more new. I think I've seen it more so ramp up over the last 4 months, where USCIS is really hammering on whether or not the experience is progressive, because that is really kind of the one subjective element of the advanced degree section. What does progressive mean? If you have a client who has progressive experience across a specific or singular job, that's a little more difficult. So you have to show that they've gotten better titles, they've gotten more responsibilities. It's a little easier when you have someone who spent 2 years at one place as an assistant manager and then they got a new job as a manager. That is clear progress. But USCIS has definitely been starting to hammer on what does progressive mean. So making sure in those work experience letters that you get to demonstrate that this is progressive. They have gotten more responsibilities. They have gotten better titles. They've gotten paid more. Anything to show that they really have been progressive in their career so far.
And because there's no regulation or statute defining what progressive is in this particular situation, it becomes really complicated, right? Because we have to kind of create a definition ourselves, and they're so subjective when they read this. So the more objective evidence you have, showing the increase in the pay and I guess the summary here is you're not static. There was a progression in your career in some way, shape, or form.
Thank you for that. I have a question for you, Flavia, and this was also coming from one of the registrants. I'd like to hear about EB2 NIW for entrepreneurs without any advanced degree and continued experience.
Oh, we do those all the time. We do those all the time. This is not, and we were talking before we start the webinar, people read dinosaur and they think that everybody has to have 2 master's degrees or 5 master's degrees and, postdoctorate degrees. The answer is no. We need to look at how successful they are. A lot of my entrepreneurs don't have a degree at all. That's why I see sometimes more RFEs, because I do exceptional ability more often than not. So the answer is, this is not a way to deter you. Really, as long as you can have 3 out of the 6, and of course, if you can argue the 6, why not? There's a 6 criteria for exceptional ability. Don't let the lack of a degree intimidate you. In fact, as I said, most of my clients are extremely successful and most don't have a degree. So this is not a deterrence.
Okay. Good to know. Thank you. Anthony, you want to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, if you have a client like that, it just encourages creativity. You have to really sort of, put on the lawyering boots, as it were, and really try to navigate that realm of, just because someone, again, doesn't have an advanced degree, this visa type specifically contemplates that possibility. So being able to be flexible in not only what kind of evidence you obtain, but working with your client to try to come up with creative solutions to what these criteria are, and then demonstrate that to USCIS is the name of the game. So it does feel like I need to have a degree, as Flavia said, and we were talking about before, it feels like I should have this. And we are sort of fighting against a precedent decision where the subject of the precedent decision had all these degrees, so it makes it look like you need this. But just because that one person did doesn't mean everyone does.
And again, that's being broad, right? So we were talking before we started, if you have a producer, normally my producers don't have a degree, but they're actually entrepreneurs, because, the film crew, they are generating jobs. So you can really go on a deep dive regardless of what the profession is. It's not just limited to entrepreneurs. It's not limited to STEM. You can go arts, you can go use matter of masters to do with sports. We do it all the time. So the answer is, that's what Anthony said, you be creative. And that's the fun of the NIWs, I think.
Indeed. There's a lot of fun behind this. And I mean, you guys are doing this every day, but there's a lot of ambiguity to the terms. There are a lot of things that are not clear. There are a lot of things that are vague, and it depends on the creativity of the immigration strategy at the end of the day, right? And this is what we want to do. We want to go through the prongs, analyze what's happening, and also provide resources for other attorneys that are facing the same, but maybe they haven't faced as many RFEs. So identifying what it is that USCIS is checking, what's happening on those RFEs. So we can definitely go into those. As I said in the beginning, we're going to go through the 3 prongs. And with each, we're going to talk about RFEs that we're seeing from Joorney. And some of those are by working with you, with Colombo, with Flavia, and of course with many of our partners. So it's good to see the different scenarios and what are the most common. So the 3 prongs, you probably all know this, but I'm going to recap on those 3. So first of all, proposed endeavor, that it must have substantial merit and national importance, well positioned to advance the proposed endeavor, the 2nd prong. And then the 3rd prong, on balance, it would be beneficial for the U.S. to waive the job offer and labor certification requirements. So let's jump into the 1st prong. And Anna, take it away and let us know what we're seeing on our side.
Yeah, sure. Let me pull up the presentation so you can follow. As for the 1st prong, is of course, you all know it's all about substantial merit and national importance. And when it comes to substantial merit, it can be demonstrated in a range of areas. It's technology, culture, health, education, and it's usually referred to any type of work actually that contributes to the improvement of some really important factors of life in the US. On the other hand, the national importance is all about the prospective impact of the endeavor. So whether here we are defining whether the endeavor is having national or even global implication within a particular area or field. On our end, we just tackled some of the points that we see as common issues that appeared, and I listed them briefly here. And the first one would be exactly this, the one that I mentioned, lack of this potential prospective impact as the most important one, I guess. The missing information about the location, and we'll discuss it very soon. The lack of detailed business plan, which is our area for sure, and a lack of evidence showing these indirect impacts. So there is a certain ambiguity that I would like to discuss very soon with you, and I'll actually start with this economic impact. As the USCIS says, the economic impact is not required to establish the substantial merit, which comes as a benefit, of course, to those petitioners who work in the field of pure science or the furtherance of human knowledge, of course, and that their focus should extend beyond the economy and job creation, and it should really show also the improvements in societal welfare, the cultural enrichment, artistic contribution, etc. What they also take into account here, and it's really important to mention, are the actual government initiatives or executive orders or anything similar that they see nationally important where they actually define that something is really nationally important or a part of a national initiative. I will go to our first case study for the first point, lack of potential impact. And here starts the ambiguity that I mentioned earlier. And of course, I would like to hear your opinion on that one as well. Here, as I mentioned, the USCIS generally emphasizes that they look for broader implications within a particular field. But somehow they always also mention that the significant potential for the job creation, for employing US workers or having other substantial economic effects is also very important. And also they very often specify about these economically distressed or depressed areas that they can be defined also as nationally important. So sometimes, and we see it, that economic impact and job creation are some of the single points that come first when you analyze the RFEs. And it's often, unfortunately, to the client's detriment. So if we can see the first case study, I highlighted it so it can be read very clearly. And when they said that they noted that they looked for broader implications of the proposed endeavor, it should also be important for the endeavor to have significant potential to employ US worker or has other substantial positive economic effects, particularly in an economically depressed area, and that this may be understood to have national importance. Here, if we tackle the real life case of a petitioner who planned to start an after-school program for preschool children focused in STEM education, the USCIS seemed to look solely at economic effects, or of course lack of it. If we see the yellow part, it says that the petitioner has not demonstrated that the specific endeavor he proposes to undertake has significant potential to employ US workers or otherwise offer substantial positive economic effects for the nation. So somehow here it appears that the USCIS completely overlooked the educational impact and the potential influence that this petitioner will have on the children's development, preparedness for higher education and the job market. And it appears as if they didn't define it that it has economic impact. They thought it's not enough. So this is something perhaps to what's up for debate. And the similar case that we had is also for EB2 professional and personal plan for performance management master specialist, where USCIS, which may come as a surprise, actually asked for revised projections for future growth and hiring, as if they were asking for certain financial projections for projected sales, for sales strategy, and so on, and the job creation, even though it was a personal professional application. So as we all know, it's the petitioner in this case is not able to directly hire anyone or make financial projections. In this
do you mind if I just opine on one thing with this particular case study? So this particular RFE includes a statement that frankly gives me a coronary and leaves me losing more and more hair on a regular basis.
I didn't want to do that. Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's not you. It's USCIS that does it to me. So as we stated before, the standard is whether or not there's a significant potential to employ U.S. workers or offers substantially positive economic impacts. This particular RFE contains language that really is an indication of where an officer, as of late, is flipping that on its head, where they say you did not provide information showing future anticipated revenue and staffing levels. What they'll start to do is they'll say, well, it's not the substantial likelihood of employing U.S. workers. You haven't demonstrated that you're going to employ enough workers. And that's a problem because that's not what the Danisar decision states. The Danisar decision doesn't state or provide a baseline number of employees that you must, provide for or employ in order to meet this requirement. The standard is, do you have a substantial likelihood that you'll do it at all? So that's a trend that's starting to rear its ugly head with a lot of more entrepreneurial clients, a lot of business related endeavors of how many people are you going to hire, and then fighting back against USCIS about, well, it's not a matter of how many people I hire, it's whether or not I'm going to hire anyone at all, and making sure that you argue that accordingly.
Yeah, I completely agree on that one.
So Anna and Anthony, so what's happening here is first they're asking for one thing and then they're evaluating for another. That's what's happening. So basically they say, okay, it has to go beyond the economic implications. And if you don't include them, they'll say, wait, but where are the economic implications, right? So that's what's happening. And I mean, it comes to a surprise that it's also happening from people that mentioned that they're going to seek employment. So they want to see projections for them too, despite the fact that they're going to get a job.
Yeah, exactly.
And would you usually fight back on that, saying, hey, you don't need to show projections? Or do you say, okay, then let's include a hypothetical situation where projections can be included? How do you tackle that? And this goes for any Flavia or Anthony.
I think it depends on the strength of the case. I'm just going to, fight in the sense of disagree strongly if I have a strong case to begin with. So if it's something that is unreasonable for the particular client, then of course I will push back. But I also think that we need to step back and just go back at when we're talking about substantial merit and national importance, just on a brief intro here, it's the unicorn. Right? So every case has substantial merit somehow, and national importance is this mythical creature that is very difficult to define, encounters, it's very difficult. So, and now with the conflating issues that Anthony is showing, it's not or, it's and words matter. So it really depends, in my opinion. I don't know how you approach this, Anthony, but it really will depend on the client, the evidence I have. If I'm begging and if I have a weak case, I'm not going to put my punching bag and start hitting the officer. I want him or her to approve my case.
Right. No, and it does. I wholeheartedly agree. It 100% depends. So I'm actually going to go back to 2 slides just to give sort of an example. Sure. So with this one, with the K-12 children focused on science, technology, engineering, mathematics, for an instance like this, my strategy would likely be to reorient the officer away from the economics and really argue that the benefits are social on this one. While it is possible that, yes, job creation, economic benefits are beneficial, and we level with that, but that's not this endeavor. Because this endeavor's benefits are inherently placed in the social aspects of creating programs for these children to provide these these educational experiences. And I've had success in that with basically reminding USCIS that Danisar didn't have any economic benefits either. He wasn't making any jobs either. So this is just one facet and factor that you can consider. And in this particular case, the social benefits are really where you should focus on the national importance.
Yeah,
great. Yeah. Thank you for the insights. Anna, do you want to show the other case?
Yeah, sure. The next one I picked is actually the case of the dentist who aims to provide very specialized dental services and oral surgery. And here we sort of have everything. They question the internet article saying that the internet printouts fail to demonstrate the potential prospective impact of the petitioner's project or other related companies that the petitioner has worked with. And then they provided an example to say that the provided internet printouts do not demonstrate how the petitioner's projects have national or global implications in the field, or that it has potential to employ U.S. worker or has another substantial positive economic impact. So here it appears that we have a combination of everything. So as if the USCIS wants to keep us on our toes, never knowing what's coming our way, meaning that they put it all together sometimes, and sometimes they specifically focus on one point. So I'm sure that both Flavia and Anthony have seen many of these combinations together or separately. Then next one, before I proceed, is there anything perhaps on Flavia's and Anthony's side that you would like to comment on the previous one, on the lack of potential impact, or we can move to location?
Yeah, location has become more popular than it used to be now. So I think it's a topic to touch on for sure. Let's see the examples, Anna.
Yeah, when we are talking about the location, we're talking usually about one thing, economically depressed area. And it's always actually tied to economic impact in general. So we are back to this economic impact again. And if we see the example that I wanted to show here, is that the USCIS questions that actually the petitioner has not submitted evidence to demonstrate her business in this case will be operating in an economically depressed area, as if this is really a requirement, like the primary requirements. Even if the petitioner, what follows is actually that they are questioning that even if the petitioner had submitted evidence to demonstrate that her business would be operated in an economically depressed area, the petitioner did not submit documentary evidence demonstrating the substantial positive economic effect. So what they want to see is here is actually that not only they want to see that it's going to be economically depressed area, but they want to see all effects loud and clear there. What is the job creation, what the job creation in that area would be, what would be the taxes to be paid, what's the profit and earnings for the household. So everything that comes within this economically depressed area, or what is the economic impact as a whole, I would say. When it comes to location, also what I wanted to point out with the next one, the case study, it's actually that here they again clearly show it as a part of national importance. So it's in the core of the national importance. And among other factors like they want the broader implications of the industry, that they want to see that implications are beyond the company's clients and the future employees, that they want to see the potential to employ U.S. workers or otherwise offer substantial positive economic effect. Then the next one is that the record does not show that the area where it will be operate is economically depressed. So it's like in the core of the national importance. All with the other factors that seem really important, they put location here as well.
If you don't mind, just briefly,
Yes.
This is something that we really expand on because they made this requirement, right? They're expanding more and more. And we go into the average household income, the unemployment rate, the state level GDP, the percentage of the population that is below the poverty line, location, if there's a natural disaster or something that has happened that makes that location economically depressed. So this is where normally I tell people to be less is more, but this is where you should be verbose and include more data because that's what they're looking for.
Yeah, completely with you on that one. On our end for the BPs, and I showed it here, it's how we address it. It's aside from other arguments, of course, we usually use the map to show if the company is operating, and there are several good sources for this. One of it is this interactive map, or also the hub zone, where we actually show whether the company is operating in, and to support this argument further. The last case study for this one is actually, I picked this one because I want to point out here that they are actually questioning why it is vaguely stated whether it will be in the economically depressed area or not. So here they say she also plans to continue to practice orthopedic rehabilitation, but it's not specified where she will actually pursue her specific endeavor. So again, the question is whether we are in the economically depressed area or not.
Okay. So there, before we jump into the indirect impact, let me ask some questions about location. But even before that, I wanted to tell everybody who is on the webinar that you're receiving like pop-ups with websites. So that's like a new feature. So just to let you know, if you want to remove those, please refresh and then they should go away. Okay. In case if it's like popping up to you. Okay. So then let's talk about location. So for both Anthony and Flavia, is location something that you determine like initially on the initial submission? Is it something that you use as a strategy for the national importance in every case or not necessarily?
Yes, I do. Unless I'm doing STEM cases and I'm doing researchers. That's the only, I'm trying to think here on my feet, but that's the only scenario where I'm not focusing on the location, because my client's research is going to broaden the field and expand the field. But other than that, no matter if it's arts, if it's, business, if it's culture, I always include location. And I think they're right to ask for that. I mean, I hate to agree with USCIS, when you say, I am going to do this for the United States and I'm going to broadly enhance the societal welfare. Define that, right? So we need to be specific. We need to give them what they need to hear to approve the case. So this is something that when I see on an RFE, which I rarely see, thankfully, this is something that they're right. That's part of what the hook, the narrative that you were going to present to them.
Okay.
I mean, from my perspective, I also try to hammer in on location as much as possible. I try to get the client to provide me as specific of a location as they can. Like, I try to avoid a particular state, because if I try to expand on a particular state, USCIS will come back and say, well, you're not going to impact the economy of the entire state. And I want to try to hammer in on the location as specific as possible. One other thing to note, at least from RFEs that I've seen and I've had to fight against, is that you can say a particular client is going to set up shop in Orlando or in Tampa or whatever city and location, but there's the downstream impact of, which we'll get to, of is what the benefits of their company or the impacts that they're going to have materially benefit this area. And USCIS has started to question whether or not, just because you're located in a particular area or your business address is in a particular area, doesn't necessarily mean that the overall impacts are going to be in that area. So try to avoid overly emphasizing that, yes, we are going to be here, we are going to generate some economic benefits and employment for this area. But if you have a client who has, say, interest letters from North Carolina and they're located in Florida, USCIS might question, okay, are the benefits that you're actually going to have in this area? So try to walk that fine line of demonstrating I have a location, I know where I'm going to be, I know what I'm going to do, but I'm not materially limited to just this location, depending on the endeavor, of course. But if you have a client who has the possibility of expanding across state borders, make sure that that's clear, that my physical location is here, but the impact that I could have is potentially nationwide.
Exactly.
And that's how we when we work on franchise model, that's what we focus on, like the national impact, because it's going to start locally and then you go take that franchise model everywhere. But you got to be careful with that, because we are seeing on the RFEs now, it's like, okay, this is a wonderful plan, but where's the money?
Right.
We have this
That's another topic.
What is this wonderful project, but the wonderful nationwide idea. However, where's the budget for all that? So you have to be careful too with how ambitious you are when you are determining location, scope, and how broad the project is.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're running a little bit behind, so we're only at prong 1, so we need to speed it up.
Yeah, I'll be brief with this one. It's indirect impact, and we're here actually back to basics. and that is that we need to look beyond the petitioner services and its client, including this indirect impact. So as you can see where the lines are, that's the USCIS here actually says that it should extend beyond a company or clients so as to impact the field more broadly. So here they state that the evidence is actually insufficient to establish that the petitioner's proposed endeavor will impact the field more broadly or broadly enhance societal welfare or offer substantial positive economic effects. So here we go again to those basics where aside from economic impact, they want to see this indirect impact as well. Detailed business plan. I don't want to miss this one. What's the detailed business plan? I would say that for this one, everything is just about how. This is the main question here, I would say, or where they are not satisfied only with the statement that it will be this way, but they are questioning how you will achieve this. So we can very often see that they raise questions about the sales figures, personnel projections, and action plan, proposed actions on how to achieve the projected growth. They even sometimes mention sales strategy, marketing strategies, and so on and so on. I'll go quickly through this one. They are actually here listing all the personnel plan that they see in the business plan. Then they're tackling on the salaries and the achieved sales projected for year 1 and year 5. And then they say that the plan does not sufficiently explain how these figures were calculated or how the projections will be realized. Then again, they state that the plan does not state what those other jobs would be or whether they would be created. And this is in regards to multipliers that we want to use. And so they are not satisfied with only stating what the multipliers say, but they want to see what are those jobs, what are those indirect jobs that we want to present with those multipliers. Let me show to the next one. Again, here another very interesting case would be is where they were actually not that comfortable with the word using in the applicant's application, and that's the possible. Let me quickly show you here. It says that this plan shows 5 employees in year 1 and a possible total of 22 in year 5. So they seem to be bothered with this possible. Like if they really want it as a statement that it will happen for sure, something. So they are questioning this possible, and it's something that's really interesting in that regard. So perhaps some inputs on this one on the business plan will be welcomed from Flavia or Anthony.
Who wants to go first? One at a time. Anthony, go ahead.
So, I mean, from my perspective, I've seen a very marked increase in USCIS wanting to see as many details as possible in the business plan with respect to the national importance. Obviously, we'll get into prong 2 as well. But when you have a entrepreneur client or you have somebody who is starting a business in general, the USCIS is starting to want to see the relative certainty that comes with that, because they're replacing or supplanting the certainty that comes with a job offer with this plan that they're going to seek out on their own in the United States. So they are starting to get a little more nitpicky, and having a well-wrought business plan that goes over projections, that goes over employment, why you're going to need these people, not just that you're going to, but why. What is the, I guess, growth that you're projecting? And if you're going to go across multiple areas or multiple states, specifying where in those states, how many people are going to work in those outfits, to make sure that you are demonstrating to them that this is a big deal. This is important, that I may not be doing research, but I am generating real impact for this country. I am generating a real importance for the economy, and underscoring that is a very well-wrought business plan, frankly.
Great. Flavia?
I second what he said here, because that's my approach as well. I know we are short for time, so I can go on.
No, you can go on. Please do.
Well, I think you also have to be realistic, and sometimes we're hired to respond to RFEs, and I think that I'm being recorded, that sometimes USCIS is right, because the projections are kind of they extrapolate what, a reasonable business or a reasonable, then it puts the whole case into question. I recently saw a refile where USCIS went on a deep dive. So case number one was denied, and a lot of it had to do with the sales figure, personal projections. I'm not going to go on a deep dive about this, but case number one was denied. So he refiled, got an RFE, and then the officer could start comparing and contrast both cases. And they're like, you're just inflating your numbers. So the answer is, then that goes back to also to the financials, right? If you have some money to start a business, you're going to sell a house. What I like to do is get a quote. Here's my property. Once I become an LPR, I am going to sell this property and I'm going to inject this money in the business. Of course, we have talked about clients about good faith too, right? Because otherwise they just come up with make up stuff. But it's just, you have to be specific. And I think Joorney does a really good job at taking our feedback when we have to adjust this because they're going to come back to us asking for more details. So then that's basically our approach.
Thank you, Flavia. So as I see it here, they're almost as if they were evaluating an E2 business plan at a certain point in time.
Oh, yeah.
When you start adding an endeavor to it, a business, they're like, okay, give me more, right? And then that's where assumptions for sales become like very important to make sure that we explain on the business plan where those assumptions are coming from. So those are going to be definitely important. And then also going back to what I asked before, do you fight the fact that they're asking, or do you just give them the information to add to what you already gave to them? So I mean, probably it depends, but
it depends.
Well, it depends, but also there's something that I'm conceding lately. Now, I don't know about you, Anthony, but I've seen lately they are questioning the EPI multipliers, right? So I also see that they are happier to accept the Bureau of Economic Analysis. So why not? So, you know what I mean? So if that helps move the needle towards my, the case being approved, why not? So it's a way, I guess, it's a strategic decision on a case by case basis,
Yeah, and frankly, from my perspective, an officer by officer basis. So I track, and I encourage you, if you are not doing this, I highly encourage you to do this, to absolutely track the officer data, figure out what the officers want, what they don't want. Some officers are going to want this. You may get lucky and, you get an officer who approves 100% of the cases, or you get an officer who doesn't believe anyone deserves an NIW, and you get this. So it's a lot of the RFE process is reactive, right? It's you try to be proactive on initial filing, but RFE is necessarily a reactive thing. If you track the officer adjudication data and you see that officer XM whatever has denied 4 cases, approved 6, what are they doing the 6 approved cases versus the 4 denied? That really demonstrate what we need here. And I do think it's beneficial to really utilize that when making your decision as far as, do I need more information? Do I not? Because the other element of this is that there is an officer that we are sort of working with, that yes, the criteria may say one thing, the Danisar decision outlines another, but really we're dealing with a person who has their own opinions, their own, wants and wishes. And when there's 170 different officers at just one service center, roughly, you're dealing with 170 different opinions. So it does really boil down to a lot of very specific information.
Internally, what we do in my office is first we have a pool of samples, right? So we have by categories. We have the architects, the lawyers, the producers, the actors. So we keep track internally how it goes. Also, we also like to look at NIWappeals.com because you kind of can see what has failed. I like to look at the negative, right? What has not worked on appeal. Because that gives me a framework, especially so it's something that I haven't worked before in an industry that I'm not familiar with. If we're talking about as we say in Portuguese, the rice and beans, the everyday stuff, I don't go there. But if I'm working on a weird profession or something that I'm not familiar or something that is a personal plan, a professional plan that is very narrow. I like to look at NIW appeals because it's helpful. And the final thing is, internally, we also keep a track. We have a spreadsheet with the officer's trends. And this is something you need to do. It's not like, oh, can you share with us? Because this is important so you know their patterns. They write the same way. You can see officers, okay, this officer is trained on EB1As, and he or she is adjudicating this case or this line of cases as if it was an EB1A. This is a very common thing. You will find EB1A language in EB2 RFEs. Don't assume that the officer is well-versed on NIWs. So I think that's a caveat that, that's important for the framework, because of these 100-something officers, some of them are not NIW trained.
Right. And I see a lot of questions in the chat about if there's like a website or where you get that. It's self created.
You gotta do your own.
Same thing with me. Yeah, you got to do it yourself. I've been running a spreadsheet for, across however long I've been doing this. Or at least contributing to one, for tracking this officer data. And I've tried to get as comprehensive as Flavia said in terms of what you're doing, because you don't know these officers' names. You just have a number. And the best thing that you can do is really look at what works and what doesn't, because then from a strategic standpoint, as a lawyer, you can look and say, okay, this client, unfortunately, they got an officer who hasn't approved a single case in 2 years. They just haven't. They don't want anything. Is strategically the best thing for that client to do to respond to that RFE? Or is it better to resubmit with some additional evidence, taking maybe some guidance from that RFE and going from there? It's, making sure if you can look and say, how much time are we going to spend on an RFE that is ultimately not going to get approved, not because the client's bad, not because you're a bad attorney, but because you have this unbounded, unchecked person that just doesn't want to approve you.
And you mentioned, Anthony, about the service centers, that there were a few that had like very clear differences. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah. So as an NIW nerd and as somebody who does a lot of this stuff, from my point of view and perspective right now, if you have a STEM-based or a research-based client, it is safe to send them to the Texas Service Center. If you have the possibility to try and route your cases to the Nebraska Service Center at this time, please do it, particularly if you have an entrepreneur or business-related client. The RFEs that I've seen from the Nebraska Service Center have been much more friendly to those kind of endeavors versus the Texas Service Center, where I've seen these officers come up with the most ridiculous reasons for denying cases. There's a particular officer, XM 2352, at the Texas Service Center, who I have provided millions of dollars in realistic projections for economic benefits. And they said, but it's not tens of millions. And so when you can't pick a service center, to be clear, and I'm not encouraging forum shopping, but if you have an opportunity to have a client who is able to file to the Nebraska Service Center or figure out a way to route it there, I do recommend it because they are more business friendly at this time.
Okay, great. And the other question that you also addressed was whether to refile or fight the RFE. I think that's also a good advice on that, because one of the questions was, should I refile or reply to the RFE? But then exactly, if you have all the data on it, or if you have a feeling that that particular officer will not be aligned to the strategy that you've picked for that applicant, then you need to rethink the strategy there, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Anna, let's go to prong 2.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so here we are with the second prong, and this one, it actually focuses on factors that indicate whether the foreign national is well positioned to advance the proposed endeavor. What does this mean? Well, they are questioning the factors, of course, that include the individual's education, knowledge, record of success, skills, of course, motor or plan for future activities, and any progress towards achieving the proposed endeavor. And of course, if there is any interest, identify the potential customers, users, investors, or other entities of interest. Now, of course, what is really important to mention here that the matter of DANASAR, it does not require petitioners to demonstrate that their endeavors are more likely than not to succeed. They know that it will be very hard and difficult, of course, to define it. But some common issues that they do point out would be the issues with reference letters. If there is no progress toward achieving the proposed endeavor, and if there is a lack of information about the investment. And we can go to the case studies for those. When it comes to reference letters, I would say that some concerns to be aware of are those if the content of these letters are not that specific. I would say, and I'll go into that in more detail, a lack of information about the credentials of the people writing those letters. And if the letter actually fails to provide information on how the petitioner influenced the progress, not only at the past employers, but within the economy or society. So here we are again talking about this broader implication in the field. The first one that I want to show is the reference letter is where they actually state that the petitioner has failed to provide specific examples on how the beneficiary's work influenced the field of industry beyond adding to the general pool of knowledge. So they again say that the record does not demonstrate that the beneficiary's work has impacted the field, or that the beneficiary has otherwise been integral to advancing methodologies, innovations, techniques, or strategies. To go beyond, they again, another one states that evidence did not indicate any achievements and significant contributions to the industry or field have been recognized by peers, governmental entities, or professional or business organizations. Again, here, another case study says that none of the letters, however, explain how the beneficiary's numerous personal accomplishments and professional experience constitute recognition of numerous trainings, various licenses, and certifications, and that these personal accomplishments may be testaments to skills, experience, and talent. The record does not contain sufficient evidence that as a result of these circumstances, the self-petitioner has received recognition for all of this. And they concluded that this criterion has not been met. So here, the conclusion would be on those reference letters is that they are always questioning this broader impact, and that the petitioner has influenced not only the company, a project or that she or he has been involved in, but also the entire industry in question and their endeavors field. So they are asking for more evidence in this regard. They like to see it's beneficial, I would say, that they see some documentary evidence, such as contracts, patents, technology, and what is more important, they would like to see that any of those are actually used by the petitioner's peers in the field, that they've been recognized in the field by peers, governmental entities, or professional or business organizations. So they want to see this recognition again, and this is again some broader implication of it.
Well, do you mind if I jump really quickly here? This is something that sometimes you will see some RFEs that just completely ignore the letters, and they'll just mention broadly about the letters without a specificity. Well, cite matter of scoreball cultural sectors, right? Pair with Vergara Molina and saying how it's abuse of discretion. Then you push back with matter of Caron International. So this is an opportunity for you to actually push back. There's precedent, there's case law. I do love citing cases. I think it's very helpful. It shows that you're serious. You've shown that you know what you're talking about. It's just not just a bullet point in a checklist. So don't take, sometimes you read that like, oh, there's no specificity, or it's complementary. It's not going directly to the heart of the case or the contribution to the company. Well, as long as you have a really well drafted letters, and again, I go back to my original point, this is why we draft the letters, push back. There's scoreball, there's matter of Caron International, and cite Vergara Molina saying there's abuse of discretion, and then you can really get some, teeth on it. Just a parenthesis here, because those three cases, I think I use them constantly, not just, of course, for NIW context, but it's very on point.
Do you mind repeating those, Flavia? Sorry. Before we go to Anthony?
Sure, I can type here.
Okay, great.
I can type here.
For what it's worth, from a comparative case, I also like to utilize Bulletin EB-INS for a lot of my cases as well. That is a great one. It's more appropriate for EB1As, but you can use it as persuasive, case law for EB2 NIWs as well, because that case has a good breakdown of what the language of recommendation letters actually are and how they demonstrate extraordinary ability. And then you can comparatively say, surely if this court determined that these letters, the content of these letters demonstrated extraordinary ability, then the content of the letters for my client demonstrate at a minimum that they are well positioned for an EB2 classification visa. I would say beyond that, and yes, it's beneficial for USCIS, but it also shows to your clients as well that you are trying, you are lawyering for them, that you are not just, they like it. They like to see that you are out there fighting. Some clients may be a little bit hesitant, so obviously gauge with the clients, but you are showing your legal chops, as it were, to your client, that you know what you're doing, you are fighting zealously for them, and you're going to get them that approval.
Nice. Great. So I mean, what I'm understanding about the USCIS not wanting is basically the traditional letter of recommendation. So that's not what they're looking for. Like, hey, this person is amazing at what they do, and they work here from this state to this state. And they want to see more substance on it, right? They want to make sure that it shows progress, that it shows like achievements that they did while they were there that support the case. So yeah, I mean, I see where they're coming from as well.
Yeah, particularly if you have a client who doesn't have a lot of objective documentary evidence, you may run into that where you have a client who's done a lot, but they don't have really awards or publications to really show what they've done. So you have to really lean hard on those recommendation letters, and having very well wrought recommendation letters when it really is kind of, even though it's not supposed to be the cornerstone of your case, but it may kind of be. Having that evidence really be as beneficial and well wrought as possible is critical.
Okay.
Yeah, there is a good point that you mentioned, actually, Marinella, and it's the progress towards achieving the endeavor. And in a nutshell about this one is that they want to see that not everything is in the air, but that there has been something already done towards achieving the endeavor. And the common issues perhaps that we encountered in this field is the lack of information regarding existing or potential clients, perhaps the lack of letters of intent to collaborate with the company or interest from potential employers, if we are talking about the personal and professional applications, and the lack of evidence that the petitioner has a critical role in the field related to this endeavor. What is good about this one, I need to praise the USCIS on this one a little bit, is that they usually come with some really clear, list of the evidence that the petitioners have to show in order to demonstrate and address this one. So basically, it would be great if the petition includes any evidence demonstrating already done work, communication, any type of negotiation already done, any type of progress that matches the claims of the endeavor is worth including, both in the business plan and the overall package, of course. And it only raises the value of the claims made because they are supporting their claim that something has been done already, that it's not just something that's been defined and we haven't moved from there.
Now, a caveat here, sorry to interrupt, but a little caveat here is I do a lot of, so my clients are Brazilian and French, right? So I have the clientele. And a lot of my French, they are E2 to EB2, right? So there's a distinction that we have to be careful because sometimes you get an RFE saying, well, this is a continuation of your E2 business. So it's just, if you do have that population that are going from the E2 to the EB2, you have to be mindful that, that taking the substantial steps towards the endeavor does not look like it's a continuation of the E2 business. Just a side.
No, and absolutely, because I see that too. And the other pitfall that I fall into, or that maybe not I fall into, but that I'm having to fight out of from USCIS, is that the business is not the endeavor. The business is the vehicle by which they effectuate the endeavor. And it's important to make that distinction for USCIS, particularly when you have an E2 that, yes, they have this, but they're not just doing that, right? There is a bigger, more philosophical thing that they're benefiting, and here's why that matters. The endeavor tells the story, not the business. The business is the vehicle, and it's super critical. But for a USCIS perspective, you need to make sure they understand that.
Yeah, here it's just a list of the requirements coming from the USCIS regarding this point. And here they stated they want to see an evidence of grants that the beneficiary has received, listing the amount in terms of the grants, copies of contracts, agreements, or licenses resulting from the proposed endeavor, evidence of achievements that a beneficiary intends to build upon or further develop, or any other evidence demonstrating that the beneficiary has a leading, critical, or indispensable role in the endeavor. So there is a clear list, it appears, that can be followed. The next one I want to tackle, and it's very interesting, it's an investment. It's all up for debate whether this is essential or not for EB2s, but we do encounter a lot of these in the RFE, so we cannot ignore them, that's for sure. Here, basically, I would say that everything is about defining whether the petitioner has partners or sufficient sources of funding the proposed endeavor. So they want to see, or how they propose the petitioner should address this point, is that they want to see any evidence, such as potential customers who engage the services of the petitioner, users, investors, any other people that are interested to make some investments. And additionally, of course, if they have received any types of grants, awards, or other, it can be also, of course, non-monetary support from the U.S. investors or governmental entities with authority over the endeavors field. So they often ask about this one, the investment, or what are the funds needed in order to support the endeavor. Here, if we take a look, it says that the evidence that the beneficiary has received, it's what they are asking, has received investment from U.S. investors such as venture capital firms, angel investors, or startup accelerators in amounts that are appropriate to the relevant endeavor. So I would like to see, I would like to hear from Flavia or Anthony their standpoint on this one, because it's something that's always questionable.
Oh, I include as much as I possibly can. This is where you go above and beyond. And now, if you're working with a startup, I love those because it's easier. You know, you have VC funding, you have all kinds of data. Those are the ideal clients. Now, there are the normal clients who don't have that. And then you have to be creative too and say, hey, you know, send emails. I've sent emails of people back and forth trying to get meetings and trying to get, investment discussions started. That's evidence. You know, they're like hustling. They're hustling for their business. They're fighting for their endeavor. And I think, of course, letters of intent or memorandums of understanding are much better and much more formal. But if your client cannot have it, at least start a conversation with potential investors. And you can use that evidence. When beggars cannot be choosers, I've used emails, letters, WhatsApp groups.
Oh yeah, LinkedIn messages.
Exactly.
Sure.
So
Sure.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, if you have, because I've run into it a time or three, where a client just says, I have nothing, but I can do it myself. I have the capital. Fine. If you have the cash, if you have the financing on your end to demonstrate, if you have these sources of income to demonstrate that you don't need anyone else, fine, but you're going to have to prove it. So we're going to need to provide some bank statements. We're going to need to provide some financial records. We're going to need to provide, as Flavia mentioned before, some assessments of real estate. If you intend upon selling that real estate in order to fund this business venture, that's okay. It doesn't help you really by way of the interest in what you seek to do, but at least it overcomes the other aspect of how are you going to do what you're going to do. So if a client is look at you and say, I don't have this, try to reorient them in a way that, no, you do have things that are still beneficial that we can use in a different way. And we can get the interest evidence from other types of avenues other than just pure investment.
Thank you, Anthony. Yeah, that's really a good point, because they see this and they're like, no, this is very far away from what I can get. But then they know that there are some things that they do have that may work. So you also start becoming Sherlock Holmes here, right? What do you have? What can you have? Are you sure? I mean, tell me what you've done, and then maybe some of that can also help the case, right?
And for my, my STEM peeps or my research peeps, what I do is I tell them, okay, so, you apply for grants. And they go, yes. Okay. So you're applying for a grant, but instead of money, you're getting a green card. So if you put them in the mindset that they are actually doing something that it's, that they're used to, it eliminates a lot of the stress, because the money part is more objective. But sometimes when we work with researchers, they are more like, well, I don't know how to frame this. I'm like, well, do a grant project and we will spin it the way we need to for USCIS.
Nice. Great. So, Anna, should we recap on the third prong really quick and then go to Q&A?
Yes, sure. Well, the last but not the least, third prong. And I'll go briefly through this one. In balance, it would be beneficial to the U.S. to waive the job offer and labor certification requirements. So here, what's the crucial about this one, that's proving actually that on balance, the benefits inherent in the labor certification process, meaning protecting jobs and job opportunities for the U.S. workers, are outweighed by factors presented by the foreign national that are deemed to be in the national interest. And one specific point to be aware of in this regard is the urgency, or whether it is sufficiently urgent to warrant foregoing the labor certification process. Some of the possible issues that can appear are insufficient evidence supporting an urgent national interest, or endeavor not leading to job creation. Of course, I will go through really quick through those case studies I here highlighted is sufficiently urgent to warrant foregoing the labor certification process. And here, what we see that's the petitioner failed to submit evidence that his knowledge or skills are not easily articulated in labor certification, or that he presents benefits to the United States through his proposed endeavor that outweigh those inherent in the labor certification process. So what we can conclude here is the national interest waivers applicants who are working on important time-sensitive research in areas of significant national interest, such as, for example, national security, will also have to demonstrate that their work is sufficiently urgent or time-sensitive. So it's not enough just being really important. It has to be time sensitive, of course. And we cannot, it seems like that we cannot overlook this urgency matter, that we need to always reiterate it because the urgency of surrounding the endeavor is always taken into consideration. The next one, I gave an example on one of the examples on how we address the urgent national interest in our BPs. I provided a certain example about the petitioner whose endeavor was to provide stability to America's supply chain by developing some optimization strategies. And here, what we really want to show is that there is an urgent need. So we focus on economic impact and why it is important for well-functioning of the supply chain, and why it is essential for the country's economic growth, job creation, and overall prosperity. And of course, we don't want to miss a chance to mention some of the government initiatives. In this specific case, it was the President Administration Initiative Executive Order. And we want to identify all the vulnerabilities and how to address them properly. We also didn't miss a chance to to mention how the great supply chain channel is actually important in some really, really important life circumstances, like we had COVID-19. And the aftermath, of course. So it goes again beyond this economic impact, and it has to have the positive impact on society in general. because it ensures human survival, and which again we witness during pandemics, improves the quality of life and so on. But at the end, what we want to highlight is that the industry is heavily reliant on the innovation and the potential for some high-level professional entering the market to address a crucial gap. And this is particularly in the aspect of knowledge transfer. Endeavor not leading to job creation. Here is an example where they actually briefly went through some critical aspects of the business plan, where they discussed, again, the sales forecast, everything that was presented in terms of marketing strategies, services, etc. But then they said the petitioner has not demonstrated she currently employs any individuals with her company. So they really want to see again that there will be job creation related to this specific endeavor. Some of the ways we address it in the BPs is to use actually this Economic Policy Institute National Job Multiplier Analysis to demonstrate the total indirect jobs. So aside from presenting clear, detailed personnel projections on both in-house and 1099 employees, we want to go further, an extra mile, and show this these multipliers for the indirect jobs. Likewise, we rely on regional input-output modeling system, which is usually used to study or to estimate a certain local impact of a project, of a certain project on a region, and it can be expressed in various aspects. And one of it's sales or gross domestic product earnings or employments. The example I'm going to show is here for the real estate industry in Florida. And here we discuss actual direct effects on employment and the effects on household earnings. So this will be about those two. And now I try to be as quickly as possible so we can have time for the questions.
You were, Anna. Thank you.
I just want to add some really quick on this particular point on the balancing test. If you're working with self-employed and entrepreneurs, cite back to Dinosaur. You know, we always copy and paste in every single case a particular section. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically, we copy more, but basically, as previously stated, NYS DOT's third prong was especially problematic for certain petitioners, such as entrepreneurs and self-employed individuals. This more flexible test, Dinosaur, which can be met in a range of ways as described above, is meant to apply to a greater variety of individuals. Cite back to them. Tell them, like, this is what you all say. So this is something that we do argue in the third prong. Sorry.
Absolutely. And in line with that, we reference the actual RFE in 90% of cases. USCIS puts in the RFE like that bullet point list of what would manifest as evidence. They say in there whether or not the petitioner is self-employed such that getting a labor certification is impractical. Just say it right there. As USCIS states, it would be impractical. Our client is self-employed. He can't get a labor cert. It's by default impractical.
Thank you. So as I promised, I'm going to share the code here, but actually this is where the good stuff is going to start, because I'm going to start with the Q&A, and I hope Flavia and Anthony, you're okay, like going a few minutes beyond, so we can answer some questions because we have many. So for those who have to leave, the code for the CLE, for the 1.5 CLE credit is going to be 231298-3N. 231298-3N, as in Nancy at the end. I hope you stay. We still have around 180 people here. So let's start with the questions. Thank you for all the insights about the prongs. Anna, very thorough as well. I wouldn't imagine why somebody would go with a business plan with anybody else after hearing you talk. Not because I work here at Joorney Business Plans, but thank you for that. Okay, so let's get started. We have a question from Joe Bovino. Hey, Joe, thank you for attending. I appreciate it. What are some names of companies that provide certification that a foreign degree has a U.S. equivalent?
Personally, we use Silvergate. That's who we use. They do really well for us. So I've used Silvergate.
Silvergate, Western World Education Services. Those are my two go-tos.
Okay. Thank you. We have a question from Barry Lieber. How do you deal with an RFE alleging that the employment history entered in the DS-160 does not correspond with the employment history listed in the NIW application?
Oh, yikes. Okay, for them to go to DOS records, Houston, we have a problem.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, I've never seen that. I've had them compare, being hired on RFEs, comparing previous filings with the new filing, but never had a DS-160 brought into question.
Okay.
Yeah, same. I mean, I haven't experienced that personally. I mean, some sort of attestation from the client regarding the discrepancy off the top of my head in terms of why that discrepancy existed, and then certify that the employment letters or whatever sort of employment history that they've had is what they are going with. But I haven't seen that.
Okay, great. There's a first that you haven't seen. Okay, so we have a question from Felipe Brino. How do you feel about using AI or technology to propose endeavors and clients who do not have a background in tech?
So are you referring to trying to utilize, if you're talking about trying to shoehorn AI into a non-AI based endeavor, you run the risk of, if the client doesn't have any background in AI, because really that's what it boils down to. What is the client and what does their background look like? Because you have to prove that they are well positioned to advance that endeavor. So if they don't have a storied background or some sort of like narrative background in AI, and we're just trying to put it in there because that's the hot topic right now, I don't like it. I did the same thing with when I was working on a lot of medical researchers and doctors and scientists. When COVID hit, everyone wanted to put COVID into their proposed endeavors, that they were going to do something with COVID because it was nationally important. It was on the discussion. But if they have no background in doing anything with immunology or virology or developing these vaccines, then I'm sorry, but it's hard to prove that you are well positioned to do something in relation to a field that you don't have any background in.
Agreed.
Okay. Thank you for that. Okay, so this is a question that usually pops up about pilots. I have a few questions on pilots. So I think you can both talk about your stance on the pilot issue, but let me provide the question. Have you? Okay.
Go ahead. I'm ready for this one. I'm ready for this one.
Add that in the chamber.
Okay, so the question is, have you seen harsher RFEs or more denials for pilot based on exceptional ability?
Well, I just do pilots on a very narrow situation. If you develop some training material, if you have a unique expertise and you're going to, that's your narrative, that's your hook for your national endeavor, that you're going to do something in the aviation field in the US, then I will do a pilot. Okay. But other than that, if you just fly an airplane and that's your ability, I'm not touching it. I don't want it. It's going to become a hot mess. And people say, oh, here's my flying hours. I'm like, so what do you do? Did you train something? Do you do something different? I have a guy now, he's from Mexico, and he created this training program. Oh, that's no problem. That's a no-brainer. But if you're just a pilot, I don't touch it.
Yeah, I very much agree that it's the risk you run with pilots is honestly in national importance, because it's really tough to prove that what they're doing. Yes, flying an airplane, there's a pilot shortage, all of these things, great. But really, USCIS will bite back and say that that's something that's contemplated in the firm process, that they'll say that, you're not doing anything that's going to materially impact your field. As Flavia said, if they're doing something that's like a training program, sorry. Pilots choke me up. If they're doing a training program, or if they've developed and designed some sort of novel way of flying an airplane, then great, I'm all ears. But if you were just flying an airplane, it's a very tough sell.
Yeah. And on our end, I mean, we've done previous webinars about EB2 NIWs, and what we've heard is that, yeah, just shortage is not enough, right? So it should have another edge to it in order to work. But we do prepare business plans for pilots as well. Let's go to another question. Okay, so this was the question that we had from before. When do you decide to appeal a denial instead of refiling it? So, Anthony, you already replied. I don't know, Flavia, if you had additional remarks on this.
Wait, did I?
You said that you had every officer tracked, so that.
Oh no, sorry, that was for the RFE, not for an appeal. So that's a bit of a different metric.
You're right.
With when determining whether or not to appeal, that's a whole new realm that I could probably talk for an hour plus on, because that's really my niche. But generally speaking, it's a matter of time, and it's a function of what the denial says, right? You're getting into a very finite issue of this one document. How much did they actually review the evidence? And as a reminder, for an appeal process, it is a bifurcated assessment by the AAO. It is, number one, did the officer abuse their discretion? And then two, on de novo, do the AAO want to overturn remand on a review that you do actually deserve this? And I've had appeals where the AAO has said, yeah, the officer abused their discretion, but upon de novo review, we actually agree with USCIS. And that's, I think, why the overall appeal success rate for NIWs is hovering at around 5 to 10%. It's not very frequent that the AAO actually overturns NIWs because there's so much discretion involved.
Yeah, in my practice, we rarely appeal, just because there's normally underlying status that we have to deal with, whether the TU expiring or the person's on an F1 forever, and then refiling makes more sense. And I saw a question about going to district court. Unfortunately, we can't because it's discretionary. So we have, it's with the EB1As. We can pursue federal litigation, but unfortunately with the NIWs, we can't. Hopefully one day that will change, but in the meantime, there's no option. So it's rare that we have a situation where we have a few pending right now, but it has to be something out there for us to go there.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a particularly heinous denial, like the last appeal that we found success in was an instance where the officer essentially adjudicated the wrong case, right? They were talking about a different field. They were talking about a different.
I have one pending right now. Yeah,
like that, easy done. But if you have a purely discretionary denial, you really have to do your hardest to demonstrate that not only did USCIS err, but that really re-arguing the entire case again, because yes, you can include new evidence, but how much new evidence can you cultivate in 30 days? So it's a judgment call based upon how bad the denial really is from USCIS.
Okay, we have a question. We went through the 3 prongs, right? And I now want to ask you, which prongs are people getting RFEs on mostly? And what types of clients are they happening with?
For me, it's national importance. There's no such a thing as national importance. I said originally, it's the unicorn. Every project has a substantial merit. I mean, even the projects that I don't really feel there's substantial merit, they're like, oh, I thought they would question that, but it's the national importance, and it's across the board. I'm seeing that even with the STEM cases, which for a while, when the memos came out, all the STEM cases were approved very fast, very easy, wonderfully. But now we're starting to see pushback on how the research and how things are going to be impacting, the national importance. Even though you have White House initiatives and you have all these things showing that this is necessary, we need it. It's just, for me and in my little universe, it's the national importance. I mean, of course, you see the other stuff too, but it's over and over again. I mean, what case has national importance right now?
Wholeheartedly agree. If you have a client who is not a STEM researcher or an academician, and even some of those, you're going to probably be challenged on national importance. I don't mean to be a downer with this whole thing, but national importance is absolutely the most frequent challenge that I see. Certainly some prong two, but if you have a client who's not going to be doing a postdoc somewhere, expect, or at least plan, maybe not expect, but plan for a national importance challenge.
Okay. Another question, is premium processing advisable, or would that invite even more scrutiny?
I mean, I can go first on this one from my own perspective. So a lot of this has to do with officer tracking as well, so bear that in mind. But I have a cynical view that sometimes USCIS utilizes RFEs for premium processing cases to artificially extend the adjudication timeframe on their end. I think that's more present with EB1s versus EB2s because they do have more time with EB2s than EB1s, giving that what it is. I do see some things challenged on premium processing RFEs more so than I see on regular adjudication RFEs. I don't have enough data in my own personal bank at this time. Flavia, maybe you can comment on this, but I don't have enough data to suggest that premium processing is a trigger for an RFE more than standard processing. I do see different challenges, but right now I don't have that, and I don't have enough.
I agree. I don't have enough I quantify on the EB1A, but I don't have that quantifiable on the NIWs. And my general policy for premium processing is, do you have a good case or not? Right? That's my threshold. If it's a weaker case, I first, I tell the client, but more importantly, I'm like, do you really want to, pressure the officer to analyze your case? So that's the first thing I look at. But I just don't see, and they're being approved so fast, even without premium processing. The cases that are approved, and they are still being approved, they're fast. Sometimes they're faster, as if you were applying with premium processing. So I just don't see the need to rush, especially with a retrogression. I just don't see the purpose unless, you're going to sell your house in your home country and you need to know you're immigrating. I understand.
Mm-hmm. Okay. This one is a little bit of a specific question, but it's very interesting. My client is a high-level environmental consultant for Fortune 500 companies worldwide. The problem is that most of the achievements cannot be disclosed because of NDAs signed by the client. Any relevant experience on something similar?
I have, but not on the NIW space. I've done that. I deal with that a lot on the O1 space. And we just go around the person's resume. Look where this person worked. This person cannot disclose this project. There's an animated project for a magical studio. You can go around.
That starts with a D or something like that.
Exactly. So I deal with that a lot on the O1s because my O1s, they all cannot disclose their wonderful projects they're working on. And we just, I don't know, I just try to go around, but I haven't had to deal with that on the NIW.
Yeah, I really haven't had to deal with it, at least for a little bit on the NIW sphere. I have dealt with it for more tech-related stuff where a client was working on something for a fruit-based technological company that could not readily be disclosed. And, we had to go around that you can see that, oh, look, they're working for this company. They're working in this special division of this company. What kind of division is it? Well, what do you do in this division? Are things in this division normally kind of secretive due to trade reasons? Oh, okay. Yeah. So you have to be creative with painting the narrative for the officer and having them understand that, without, I guess, directly saying it, they can't talk about what they're doing, but just trust us. It's a big deal.
And I've sent NDAs. I've redacted NDAs on the O context. Again, not the EB2. I've redacted NDAs to sanitize the whole thing and say, hey, they cannot talk about it.
Yeah.
Exactly. But you give them hints for sure.
Yeah.
We have a question from Oscar Pardo. He asks, how does an entrepreneur substantiate the potential positive economic impact? What kind of specific evidence do you like to see in your cases and RFE responses, other than projections in business plans?
I mean, for me, it's painting a picture of the downstream impact. So if you're going to be an entrepreneur and say you're going to be helping other small and medium-sized enterprises, well, painting the picture and the narrative of what is it that you're going to do that's going to impact these people, and how are they going to blossom? How are they going to really come to full fruition of what their, you know, designs and goals are? How is what you're going to do not only make you insanely wealthy, if you want to go about it that way, but what benefits are you going to bring from an economic sphere? Getting a letter from an economist that says, you know, this is what generally the expected downstream impact of what this endeavor is could be. This is what kind of burgeoning businesses could come to fruition because of this person, and really paint it out in that narrative.
Mm-hmm. We have another question from Julie Emerick. Is there a trend that NIWs are more successful if filed by an established U.S. employer on behalf of an employer rather than an employee self-petitioning?
I very rarely do EB2s with a sponsor. I have one Schedule A case right now. So it's a very rare occasion. So I don't have that data because I don't deal with it.
What about you, Anthony?
From my perspective, you win some and you lose some. And what I mean by that is, just like with anything, there's a trade-off. So you get the certainty of the prospect from prong 2 that they are well positioned, right? If you have an employer, you don't really need to parse out the plan as much, because the aspect of what they're going to do is well defined. They're going to work for this person. They are going to get this amount of money, and everything's solid. The problem that you run into is on national importance when you have a employer-sponsored NIW, because USCIS looks back and says, well, you're only going to be benefiting this employer. And if that employer is not Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, one of these huge major Fortune 500 companies, sometimes the officer finds it difficult to say that what your client is going to do is benefit anything other than this sponsoring entity. This is who they're going to benefit, and it's not going to benefit the field. It's not going to benefit a broad spectrum. So use caution. And when you get that employment letter from that company, try to get the employer themselves to say, yes, they're going to work for us, but the impact is going to expand well beyond the 4 walls of our company and is going to impact all of these spheres, and here's why.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. We have another question, Deepan Dura. Are you able to confirm whether RFEs have gotten more numerous and harder on applicants over the past year?
Yes.
Yes. Absolutely.
Hence the webinar. No,
Yeah.
Right. Well, and it's not even us. It's USCIS themselves. USCIS is providing their figures and saying that they're denying cases at this higher rate. Well, and more often than not, those denials have to come from an RFE that precedes it. So if you see an increase in denials that are being reported by USCIS, that generally means that the numerosity of RFEs is going up as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We have a question from Julia Pezzano. We saw an increase in denials disregarding the supplemental evidence submitted in response to the RFE, stating that such evidence, letters, business plan, expert letters, etc., were dated after the initial filing. Is this legit? How can we show progress in the endeavor otherwise?
I hate, with a burning, fiery passion,
Capital H.
This, I mean, it is just something that I can't stand, because the cases that they reference are matter of Kadigbak, matter of Izumi, and matter of Betancourt. Those are the 3 trifecta. And the problem is that none of those 3 cases contemplate an RFE. All of those cases talk about a client who was denied, a petitioner who was denied, and then subsequently they tried to come back through and say, well, no, now they actually satisfy those requirements. In matter of Izumi, I think it was that the petitioner didn't have the full academic degree, and then after the denial, they had finished their degree. So they came back and they tried to provide that evidence. It doesn't contemplate an RFE, and I've appealed this matter to USCI or the AAO before, that these cases don't contemplate an RFE. If USCIS is going to come forth and say that they would like additional evidence, they, in my opinion, are opening the door to getting additional evidence that may become into existence after the date of the initial filing, because now this officer is requesting this specific thing. And if an officer specifically requests something in the RFE, there is a chance that it will come after the date of the initial filing. Now, whether or not USCIS and the AAO buy that argument is a case-by-case basis, but it's definitely there.
And sometimes they buy, sometimes they don't. And sometimes they will cite the policy manual that states that the evidence has to exist at the time of filing. So it's a matter of looking what the evidence is and how significantly that changes the case too. Because if you're completely going to reframe the case and change the name of the company and change your target group, that's different. Because I've seen that. I've seen other work. I'm like, well, this is a whole new case. You cannot do that. Okay. So it depends on, I've done in a persuasive way where you can say, and they bite. You get a reasonable officer, they will buy. But again, you have to ponder also what kind of evidence are you submitting, right? Because I've seen some stuff that it's like, okay, they are right to reject this because it has completely different. Not only it's after the filing, but it substantially and materially change the argument you made in the initial filing. So there's a fine line that you have to cross. And you also have the policy manuals that states that you have that evidence has to exist at the time of filing. Now, if one thing that I push back is when you get that RFE saying, we submit the business registration, the logo, the bylaws of the business, and then they say, well, show additional information that you've taken steps toward the endeavor, then I'm like, well, you have to take this now because you're asking for it, right? And especially if the person has a work authorization and they're actually taking steps toward the furtherance of the endeavor, yeah, it's all new evidence, it's all new clients, but it's because they now have a work authorization. You asked for it and don't dare push back. So when I respond to requests for evidence, I preemptively address this depending on how it's worded, because I know where this might go if, they don't accept the evidence.
Okay. Thank you. And Anthony, if you can share like the cases that you mentioned at the beginning, that would be great for people to see it on the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can send that in there.
Thank you. We have a question from Solimar Santos. Thank you, Solimar, for attending. What's the recommended strategy when RFE does not say why any of the evidence is insufficient at all? No specifics. A very strong case. RFE just says what you submitted does not show without even mentioning any of the evidence presented.
Vergara Molina and policy manual. And I copy what an RFE must include. The 4 items, I don't remember the top of my head, but from the policy manual, there's 4 items that an RFE has to include. I also say Vergara Molina for abuse of discretion. And there's something else that I do. Let me look at my cheat sheet.
Okay.
While Anthony talks, because I know I have something else.
No, I do the exact same. I honestly do the exact same. I quote directly from the policy manual. I say that, in order to issue an RFE, you need to provide us with this guidance. And depending on how egregious it is, and if you're going to go the appeal route, you can, I guess, try to include some due process issues in there. But generally speaking, I remind the officer of what their due duty is in the issuance of RFEs, and then go back through from a fact-based standpoint and say, here are the factors, here are the prongs, here's how we meet them. And without or absent any sort of guidance from USCIS, the presumption must necessarily be that it is met. Without any sort of identifications of due deficiencies in the evidence, we are left with the presumption that we've met everything.
Okay.
And I also cite, I'm going to type this, USC 706-2A and 5 USC 702, saying a person has suffered legal wrong because of an agency decision. I'll type this here on the chat, and it's kind of mean, but, I had the situation, like I call, I'm like, we're calling the 800 number. I'm like, okay, I don't know what to respond to. Well, respond what the officer requested. Well, then you're going to get pleading paper. You're going to get tons of cites, and I'm going to threaten them. I'm going to cite the APA as well.
Absolutely. And you can even go for, if you really want to fight it, you can go through and reference that lovely Bulletini case that says that if an officer fails to materially assess the totality of the evidence, that it is by default an abuse of discretion, and say, you can't demonstrate to me that you materially assess the totality of the evidence because there's no commentary on any of it. if you assess the totality of the evidence, there would be some form of commentary on what the deficiencies are.
Thank you. Okay, there's a question about what is the average length in terms of pages of a cover letter or argumentation that you try to stay within? It seems like USCIS is not happy with lengthy letters. Any comments on this one?
It depends on the evidence and it depends on the RFE. So I think it more boils down to, again, and I hate to couch a lot in this, but I think a lot of it boils down to the officer. So there are some officers who necessarily want just a almost annotated table of contents in what kind of evidence that you're providing. I don't like doing that because it leaves way too much discretion for the officer. I like to argue. It's kind of why I'm in this space. So it's you know, it's a favorite of mine. I would say if I had to put a number on the bang on average, I would say about 15 pages.
Okay. And what about Flavia?
It depends. I'm wordy. But I am mindful with the evidence. I just saw from another firm 1,500 pages of nonsense. And it's like, it's junky. They're not going to read it. And if I'm an officer, I'm already starting looking at your case in a very, very negative way because it's like you're wasting my time. So it depends on your field. It depends on your endeavor. If you're looking at the arts, for example, you have to do a lot of indirect correlations. And you have to fluff stuff. So it's going to be 40 to 50. I don't go over that, but that's depending on the field you have to explain. When you're working with a chemist and you have to simplify what that person does for the officer and translate that to English, basically, from English to English, you know, that's a little more difficult. So I don't have an average. And I also let my associates have the freedom. The only thing is I keep track of how much time they're spending because we do track time in my firm. So, because otherwise you can go in a deep rabbit hole. So, because at the end of the day, we run a business, right? So we have to make sure that we're profitable. So, but the average is like anywhere from 25 to 50, depending on the endeavor and the person.
And that's good that you mentioned that, Flavia, because one of the registrants had asked, like, how long do you take for an RFE response, like to prepare everything? And I remember also Anthony had a number, you had a number. So if you can share that with other people here, that would be great.
To be clear, this is to actually draft the response, not to be with the client, not to collect documents. It's an average 5 to 10 hours. It depends on the complexity. We have RFEs that have taken way more and RFEs that have taken way less. But a good average is 5 to 10 hours to actually draft the response.
Okay. And Anthony?
Agreed. About 8 is what I and my team average.
Okay, great. Okay, so we've gone way beyond our time limit. So I appreciate everybody who stayed. We still have 150 people like listening to what you guys have to say. So it's definitely an interesting topic. So I wanted to ask each of you, like, for final remarks about the whole topic, RFEs for EB2 NIWs, how to tackle them, and people who are doing EB2 NIWs and people who plan to go do them, if they're still interested in doing that after the webinar. So go ahead, Anthony, you can do it, and then we'll close it with Flavia.
Sure. I mean, as a final remark from me, I do hope that this process hasn't sort of, scared you off of doing this. It's certainly not a scary process. It's something that is very manageable, but you also have to remember in a lot of cases, you're dealing with an officer who looked at your case or your client's petition for like 20 minutes, maybe an hour, just to go over it. And it's important to hit on as much as you can and try to avoid what RFEs you can from mistakes, things of that nature, provide as much as you can, but also keep it in context with your clients that, again, as I said before, USCIS is denying 30% more cases at this time. So the odds of getting an RFE are going up. So a lot of it is also tempering their expectations on that front and also reassuring them that you know what you're doing. You are here for a reason. You know exactly how to approach it once the RFE comes in. If that happens, you hope it doesn't, but if it does, you still have your back or their back, and you're going to go forward. So shore up the NIWs, get a business plan, please get a business plan. And just remember that you are the expert in the room for this.
Wonderful. Thank you, Anthony.
Well,
Flavia?
I am not going to repeat everything that Anthony said because I thought it was really well put. But I begin at the beginning in the sense that your initial consultation needs to be broad and in depth at the same time. For me to sign up on NIW, it takes me 2 consultations. One to explain, then I send them the homework to do, and then the other consultation for us to decide to work, if that project's a viable project. That helps me maintain my bottom line because I need these files to run I want them out of the door between 3 to 4 months from the time I'm hired. But for that to happen, I have to have a really solid intake process, a really solid understanding of the client because we don't want surprises, 3-year degrees from Brazil or France, anyone. So I kind of look at those documents before we even open a file. And it's important, and I spend a lot of time because we're managing expectations. And the final thing is, tell your client at the initial consultation, at the signing of the documents, throughout the process, have your paralegals when they send their status emails on a monthly basis. Your case remains pending. We have not received an RFE or a decision. Reinforce that RFE is coming. And if it doesn't come, it's a bonus, So I really, if you are experienced NIW attorney, but if you're starting to do this, you really, no matter how great your case is, not to be negative, you just have to manage clients' expectations. And finally, the most important thing that I've seen lately is a lot of interfilings, and that's a whole different topic for another day. Be careful with people underlying status. I've seen attorneys taking on an EB2 and an NIW, and the person, this is the 4th NIW that they're filing. So we have an ethical duty. So between managing a client expectations and remembering about your licenses, I think that's really, a way to end this. But they are fun, they are creative. I like my creatives to get their EB2s. I like my sports people to get EB2s. So there's a wealth of an array of fields that you can work this. So they are fun and worth doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here, for staying until the end. If you're still here, we still have like 150 people here. So thank you so much, Anthony and Flavia. Anna, the 3 of you were great.
You.
So many insights about EB2 NIWs, about RFEs, and how to tackle them. I'm sure a lot of the people who attended have so much resources today. The case law, the details, everything that you put on the chat. I know that's very helpful for everybody who attended. So thank you, everybody, for being here, our guests, and everybody who attended. Bye. Until the next time.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, and I'm going to repeat the code for those who maybe didn't hear it at the first shot. So code 2312983N as in Nancy. 2312983N. And I believe the team also included in the chat. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.